Hi class, this is Miss Sight. Obviously, I am here tonight. It is Sunday, and I'm going to start reading our next chapter book. I'm really excited to read this to you guys, and I hope that you just enjoy it and sit back. And I could suggest maybe listening to a couple chapters at a time. Many times during the day, you can listen to it. I'm going to try to record all of them soon so that you can kind of read up. We have 2 weeks left of school. I really want you guys to focus and do your very best and just power through it and learn as much as you can from now to the end of the year. The book is called Becoming Naomi Leone. It is a little bit of a higher content, kind of intense. There's some intense scenes in our other books as well, but it's a fourth, fifth grade level book. The author is Pam Munoz Ryan. She also wrote a book called Esperanza Rising. I'm going to talk a little bit about her as we go, but I'll just start today by saying that she's the author herself, lives in Southern California. She is a mix of Mexican, Spanish. She also has relatives from Oklahoma, and she's culturally mixed and blended with maybe 4 or 5 different groups. And so she talks about the perspective of those in the book, and you'll see that as you hear. And last week we did our Google Meets, and a lot of you had some really good ideas about what the book might be about when we talked about our preview when we did our little tea party online. So there's an Owen, there's a Naomi, there's a Graham, and you'll hear from the rest of it what's going on. We'll hear it as we go. I will just stop and explain as we go. Becoming Naomi Leone. So it's going to be the same as Brave as You. I will be posting this in Schoology. The questions will be there as well. So when you're done hearing it, go in and add to the discussion as you go. Okay? Here we go. The chapters in this book are each named with what's called collective nouns. And I'm going to just first start by paying attention to the chapters, and then we'll talk about them at the end and as the book goes on. Chapter 1. Wait, there's a little forward first. A rabble of yesterdays. I always thought the biggest problem in my life was my name, Naomi Soledad Leon Outlaw. But little did I know that was the least of my troubles, or that someday I would live up to it. It had been a double month of Sundays since Graham, Owen, and I were knitted together, snug as a new mitten. And I can point a stick, though, at the exact evening that we started to unravel, at the precise moment when I felt like a dog, like in that old Saturday cartoon. You know, the one where the mutt wears a big woolly sweater, and then the fox runs up and pulls a hanging down piece of yarn. Then the fox races off with it, undoing the tidy stitches one by one. Pretty soon, the poor dog is bare up to its skin, shivering, and all that had kept it together and warm was nothing more than a bedraggled string. Chapter 1 is called A Paddling of Ducks. There we were, minding our lives with the same obedience as the clock ticking. A few weeks earlier, the sun had switched to the winter bedtime, so even though it was early evening, the sky was dark as pine pitch. That meant that Graham, Owen, and I couldn't all sit out together at the White Rock patio. Instead, we had to crowd around the drop-down table in the living room kitchen of Baby Beluga. That was what Graham called our Airstream trailer. She was the absolute expert at calling things what they resembled, and only thought it looked like a miniature whale next to all the other double wides at the Avocado Acres Trailer Rancho. The trailer park was called this because it was surrounded on 3 sides by the largest avocado ranch in Lemon Tree, California. The name Lemon Tree did not appeal to Graham's sense of description. As she pointed out, there wasn't a stick of citrus in sight. A giant plastic lemon did sit on the pedestal at the Spray and Play, a combination car wash, deli, playground, and it was one of our favorite places. That lemon was a tribute to the fact that there used to be fruit orchards in San Diego County before the builders came and put a house on every scratch of spare dirt, except for the avocado grove, which was smack in the middle of town in the last countrified land in Lemon Tree. We had already put away the dinner dishes from Wednesday's chicken bake. Owen started racing through his 2nd grade homework like a horse on a trot. People were usually fooled by his looks, and they thought that he was low in school, due to being born with his head tilted to one side and scrunched down next to his shoulder. It had straightened out a little bit after 3 surgeries at Children's Hospital. But he still talked with a permanent frog voice because of something inside being pinched. One of his legs was shorter than the other, so he walked like a rocking horse would. But other than that, he was just fine. Contrary to people's first opinion, he got the best grades in his class. Graham, in her usual polyester pantsuit and running shoes, was doing her weekly hair set, rolling what little blue hair she had on those new bristle curlers that required no hairpins. I was not being mean about her hair. It really did look blue in the sunlight. And I mulled over my sorry situation at school was that 3 boys in my grade, in my 5th grade class, had decided that Outlaw was the funniest last name in the universe. They did not give me an ounce of peace. "Have you robbed any banks lately?" was one of their favorite sayings, along with jumping out at me, throwing their arms in the air and yelling, "Is this a stick-up?" My teacher, Mrs. Morimoto, said to ignore them, and I tried, but it did no good. I was fed up, so I was making a list of what I could say back to them that might be embarrassing. I wrote across the top of the page of my notebook, "How to get the boys to stop making fun of my name." I looked at my book, scooted that book in front of Graham to see if she had any ideas. "Naomi, I have lived with that name since I married your great-grandpa. Rest his soul, almost 50 years ago, and I am due proud. Besides, there are worse things in life." "But you don't go to Buena Vista Elementary," I said. She laughed. "That's true, but I can tell you that the boys have not changed an iota, and they are hard to humble. You know my true feeling on the subject, how about writing? Those boys will not bother me." Graham said that when you thought positive, you could make things happen, and when it did happen, it was called a self-prophecy. If you wanted to be the best speller in the class, you had to say to yourself over and over, "I am the best speller in the class." And then before you knew it, you were practicing, then you were becoming it. It was sort of like magic. And Graham believed this down to her bones. But I didn't think it always worked the way I had hoped. And one time that Owen and I were with children in the trailer park, I thought positive every day for a month for more kids to come to Avocado. But all that moved into Avocado Acres was a family with a teenager and a brand new baby, and Graham insisted that my positive feeling had succeeded, but I had been greatly disappointed. Before I could write down Graham's suggestion, though, Owen sneezed, and it was a big one. It was like the kind that sprinkled spittle and left his eyes all teary. "Owen, you got it on my page," I said, smoothing my page out, which only smeared the wet spots. "Sorry," he said, but then he sneezed again. "Company's coming twice," said Graham, matter of fact. It was another of her Oklahoma notions. She said them a million times, and she said she believed these with all of her heart. This one being that if somebody sneezed, somebody would pay you a visit. "We already know for sure that Fabiola's coming over," said Owen. Fabiola Morales lives next door with her husband Bernardo, just a stone's throw away in the middle of Avocado Grove. Bernardo took care of the 300 acres. In return, he didn't have to pay rent on their tiny house. Fabiola and Graham were newly retired from Walker Gordon Department Store, where they had worked for 35 years as seamstresses, doing alterations with their sewing tables face to face. If that wasn't enough familiarity, Fabiola came over every night, Monday through Friday, to watch Wheel of Fortune. So far, Graham and Fabiola had watched 743 during the week episodes without missing once. It was their claim to fame. "Well, then Fabiola counts for one," said Graham, patting her curler back in place. "I wonder who the other one will be." I looked at Owen and rolled my eyes. A fly zooming in would fulfill Graham's prediction. "Maybe Mrs. Maloney," said Owen. Mrs. Maloney was 88 and lived in the double wide next door. She came out every afternoon to water her cactuses, rocks, and cement bunnies, and only then did she ever come over for a visit. Graham said we could count on Mrs. Maloney for 2 things in life. One was wearing the same pink cotton robe every day. I suspected she had a dozen of them hanging in her closet. And the other was going to bed at 6 in the evening. "Nope, it won't be Mrs. Maloney. It's just past 6, I said. Chewing on the end of my pencil, I got back to my list, which Graham says what was one of the things that I did best. I had all kinds of lists in my notebook, the shortest being things I am good at, which consisted of soap carving, worrying, and making lists. There was my regular and everyday worries list, which included number 1, Graham was going to die because she was old. Number 2, Owen would never be right. Number 3, I will forget something if I don't make a list. Number 4, I will lose my lists. And 5, abomination. I make lists of splendid words, types of rocks, books I read, and unusual names, not to mention the lists I had copied, including baby animal names, breeds of horses, and my current favorite, animal groups from the complex and unabridged animal kingdom, with over 200 photographs. Mr. Marble, our librarian and absolute best person at Buena Vista Elementary, gave me the book yesterday when I walked into the library at lunchtime. He said, "Naomi Outlaw," he always calls me by both names, "today is your lucky day. I have a treasure for you, and I've already checked it out on your card, and I will give you this with a flourish." Then he scooped the book up in his palms, he knelt down on one knee, and he held it out to me as if it were a box of jewels, and I added flourish to my splendid words list. Mr. Marble allowed me and the two other students to eat lunch at one of the oval tables in the library every day. It was breaking school rules to eat there, but Mr. Marble didn't mind. He just smiled at us, straightened his bow tie, and said, "Welcome to the sanctuary." Sanctuary also went straight to the splendid words list. John Lee was one of the library lunch students. His parents owned Lemon Tree Donuts. He was the roundest boy at Buena Vista Elementary and one of the nicest. The other was Missy Messmaker. Her name was on my unusual names list, along with Delaney Pickle, Ryan Bearbrother, and Phoebe Lively. Mimi didn't hang out with the other girls in our grade either. The ones who were always comparing makeup and going to sleepovers. She was nobody special at school at all, just like me, but she didn't know it. She had no use for me, and once she whispered "trailer trash" when I walked by. After that, I never said another word to her, and that suited us both. "Naomi," said Graham, "is there a page in your notebook titled 'Ways to Annoy My Graham'? Because if there is, I'd appreciate it if you'd add your unruly bangs to that list." I quickly reached up and corralled the triangle of hair hanging in my eyes. I was trying to let my hair grow all one length, but in order to keep my bangs pinned back, I needed 3 clips on each side. Graham had taken to calling me Brown Shaggy Dog because of the wild mop and my predisposition to brownness, eyes, hair, and skin. I took after the Mexican side of my family, or so I've been told. Even though Owen was my full-blooded brother, he took after the Oklahoma lot. He did have brown eyes like me, but with fair skin and blonde hair like a bowl cut, like Graham called a Dutch boy. Due to my coloring, Owen called me the center of the peanut butter sandwich between 2 pieces of white bread, meaning him and Graham. "Thank you for making your old granny happy," said Graham, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "You're not that old," I said. She laughed. "Naomi, I'm your great-grandma, and according to most folks, I had no business raising you and Owen. Those who carried gossip said I had one foot in the grave and that I should have known better, but I took you on like spring cleaning anyhow. The joke was on everyone else because I got the prizes. It was my lucky day when I got you two." Owen looked up from his binder. "Today's my lucky day. Guess what one of my spelling words is? Bicycle." Any coincidence in Owen's life, such as wanting a new bicycle and then having that word show up on his spelling list, made him feel lucky. Whistling, he started writing "bicycle" over and over on a piece of paper. Graham finished rolling her hair, leaving lines of white scalp staring at us. "My clown head is on," she announced. Owen and I never argued with her description, because the yellow and purple curlers did give that effect. Graham clicked the television remote to find the tail end of the nightly news. I closed my notebook, giving up for now on my list, knowing full well that I wouldn't be able to say boo to those boys anyway. I reached into the built-in cabinet above my head and I pulled out the plastic salad bowl holding my latest soap carving. When Owen and I first came to live with Graham, I had slipped into being silent and my hands shook all the time. I was too young to remember what caused it all, but Graham's practical solution was to keep my mind and my hands busy. Soap carving had been Bernardo's idea. He said I was born to it. He would work in his shed doing his building, making wood boxes like little miniature bookshelves, and then painting them with a very bright color with scenes from little towns and sunsets. It was art from his city, Oaxaca, far away in Mexico. And I would sit with him with a bar of soap and a carving tool. Graham was nervous to death about me using a knife, so Bernardo started me out with a bent paper clip. As I proved my worth, I graduated to a plastic butter knife, and then finally a paring knife. And I picked up the partially carved duck and my knife from the pile of slippery shavings in the bottom of the bowl. I had already finished the other 2 ducks, each a little smaller than the other, but I wanted the third for a shelf above the kitchen sink. I never was content to carve one of anything, preferring at least 2 or even 3 for companionship, of lions or a circle of bears. I pulled the knife across the bar of Nature's Pure white soap. The soap sloughed off easily into the bowl, looking like shredded white cheese. I scraped in an arc, finishing off the curve of the back and off to the tail. The dry film of my hands felt like a thin glove, and every few minutes I put my palms up to the nose to take a whiff of a smell that reminded me of being a baby. "Done with spelling," said Owen, closing his books. He came over and stood next to me watching. "Naomi, how do you know what to carve?" "I imagine what's inside, and I take away what I don't need," I said, looking up. Slowly, adding to the finishing touches of the duckling, scratching out the appearance of the feathers with the pointy end of the knife. I loved this part of carving, the etching and the grooves that made the figure look true to life. I was getting ready to level the bottom so it would sit flat and not hobble on the shelf, but I didn't get one more pull of the blade before someone knocked on our door. Before we stop this chapter, we need to think about our character, Naomi. You heard she's in 5th grade. You heard about Owen a little bit. And just think about the scene and what you're seeing and the characters, and you're going to remember like our story elements. And the plot is what's happening. So try to predict, what do you think? Who's knocking on that door? And come back for the next chapter in a minute.